We probably couldn't have had the United States without populism. So we see history repeating itself, or at least trying to.
And with the type of protection Secret Service gives you, you may not want them anyway.
She has a system behind her, and she has most of Hollywood behind her. And there's a lot of sway there.
Hello, everybody. I want to welcome you to another edition of the Uncensored Pilgrims. I'm Marty McLain, along with the irrepressible
Paul Price.
His name is the same every week.
It never changes.
Never changes, Paul. But today we're going to deal with a term known as populism. Now, we're not talking about being popular. We're talking about populism.
Yes.
And it's kind of a term that people use that kind of goes across the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Because you can be a Republican and be a populist, you can be a Democrat and be a populist, you can be a conservative and be a populist, you can be a liberal and be a populist.
So how would you define it then?
Well, let me tell you what they say on the History Channel. I got this from the History Channel online. And they say, quote, populism is a style of politics used to mobilize mass movements against ruling powers. Populists claim to speak for ordinary people, taking an us versus them stance. Its leaders have used rhetoric that stirs up anger, floated conspiracy theories, pushed the distrust of experts, promoted nationalism, and demonized outsiders. Populism has become a recurring political theme in American politics and has inspired political reform, but has also been used to direct the hostilities of angry citizens to straw men.
Now that sounds like a little bit of a politically biased definition in and of itself.
Yes.
Coming from the position of maybe a group that's anti-populist.
Yeah, you know, a lot of your
Because what is the straw man that's being alleged there?
Right, it's something that a populist would say it's something that the elite or the powers that be are against.
But according that definition, whoever wrote that definition says it's been used to direct the anger of citizens against straw men. Like what, for example? I would have to ask that person.
Yeah.
Because that's an inherently
it
sort of opinionated, biased way to describe it.
Almost like there's no reason to be a populist.
That's what it sounds like.
Yes.
Although I would say, we probably couldn't have had the United States without populism, right?
That's what I was thinking when I was looking at all this stuff. I thought, well,
isn't that what the American
Sons of Liberty, wouldn't they have been a populist movement?
Isn't that what the whole American Revolution would have to be called, as populism?
You would think
the elites would have been the ruling class in England, the king,
well as certain Tories.
And then the people would have been the American people. So if populism is a bad thing, I guess you would have to say so is the whole American country as a whole.
The American experiment.
The American experiment.
Yes. Now, the BBC says this in an article. The article is titled, "What is Populism and What Does the Term Actually Mean?" They say, in political science, populism is the idea that society is separated into two groups at odds with one another: the pure people and the corrupt elite, according to this one writer.
Okay.
He says the term is often used as a kind of shorthand and political insult. Sometimes when somebody is labeled a populist, it's kind of meant to maybe take them down a notch.
I think so too. That's how it always seems to be used. It doesn't often seem to be used in a positive light, does it?
No. And the thing about populism, if you're on the left and you're a populist, you go toward socialism, and you are against the capitalist. You're against the money. And if you're on the right and you're a populist, you're for nationalism, and you go against the ruling elite.
So if you want to look at the two revolutions, you had the American Revolution and then you had the French Revolution.
Yes.
And both of them were populists, but I think you could say that's a good example of one on the right and one on the left. Would you agree?
I think you could. I mean,
American was on the right,
when
and
you had
the French
the Sons
was
of
way on
Liberty
the left.
with the people who came out of the Great Awakening in America, and then you have the people in France who wanted to go to a 10-day week, and They would coronate the woman in the Cathedral of Notre Dame, or as you say, Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And crown her the goddess of reason.
Right.
So I think you've got two different movements, and people in France got out of hand. They tend to lose their head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people did.
And the thing over here was to tar and feather.
Yeah.
But over there, they, I reckon, cut their heads off. So here's some history that the History Channel would give about populism. The first kind of inklings of populism was an American group who was known as the Know Nothings in 1849. This is what the History Channel says. They opposed immigrants and Catholics. They used the beliefs of white Christian supremacy to seize political power over minority populations. Now, already right there, I see a bias.
Well, I see a bias there too, because they're saying that the first populists, they're putting it to 1849, whereas I'm saying no, it would be 1776.
Yes. Yes.
So that's the first problem.
Yes. And they would say that the Know Nothings officially adopted the name the American Party, and they took control of the Massachusetts legislature. And eventually, however, the party, it says in this article, quote, the party lost support mainly when its members refused to craft policy addressing slavery. So by the 1860, the most party members had jumped ship to the Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
So you also, in 1874, you had the Greenback Party rose in power, and this was a confluence of farming communities that organized through local granges. This is from the article. They wanted to initiate inflation to help with debt and supported an 8-hour work day as part of a wider pro-labor platform. Then you had the Populist Party in 1892 through 1908. They were also called the People's Party. In 1892, they followed on the heels of the Greenback Party's platform, and they supported a ban on foreign land ownership, and they were advocating state control of railroads. And also they wanted a shorter work week. They, interesting enough, they were supporters of the temperance movement and anti-corruption efforts. 1892, it says that the candidate James B. Weaver won 22 electoral votes in the presidential election.
You know, that bit about banning foreign land ownership might start to make kind of sense in today's world where communist China now owns quite a bit of land all over America.
A lot of that land that they own is right next to military
installations.
William Jennings Bryant, he was proclaimed himself, it says, as a common man in working class to the working classes. He was elected to Congress from Nebraska in 1890. He was a Democrat. He was a very incredible orator. He ran for president 3 times and lost 3 times. He was a foe of monopolies, it says, and he was an anti-imperialist. He was Woodrow Wilson's Secretary of State in 1912, but he had a problem with the involvement that we had in World War I, and so he resigned from that. And Bryan supported isolationism, obviously, and he devoted his time, it says, to women's suffrage and advocating prohibition. Of course, we know him from a previous podcast as the Scopes monkey trial.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's right.
He won the case, but died 5 days later and kind of got... it just didn't go well for him, even though he won the case. It was not a good representation.
Right.
Also, there's a guy named Huey Long. He was from Louisiana. I think he probably used to own Louisiana from what I read about him. He had a slogan that said, "Every man a king." In 1930, he became a U.S. Senator. And he started the Share the Wealth Club, and this was actually a plan that he had to redistribute wealth. And he obviously was a socialist. He eventually ran for president. And in the process of running for president, guess what happened to him? He was assassinated.
He was assassinated, huh?
Yeah, there was not a slight slope on the roof, I reckon.
Oh, man.
Also, they'll give you George Wallace.
I think there's a book about him that...
Huey Long?
Yeah.
He's supposed to be very colorful.
All the King's Men.
Okay.
Yeah, we have that book down here.
Yeah.
I didn't read all of it, but I started reading it one time, so...
Yeah, he'd be an interesting guy to look into. I bet you there's no telling what's in that closet.
Yeah, probably.
George Wallace was a governor of Alabama. He's depicted in Forrest Gump. You know,
Okay.
Yeah, and he's just not a well liked guy overall. I mean, but he renounced his racism in his third run for the presidency in 1972. He was shot and paralyzed.
Huh.
After that, so he was also known as a populist. And in the 1990s, you saw Ross Perot come on the scene. He's the one that said, "You hear that big sucking sound? It's all the jobs going down to Mexico." Because he was against NAFTA, and he knew all these trade agreements were bad for the American people, and they were bad. I mean, just go to South Georgia, go to all the places where you used to have these textile industries and all types of other industries. They're gone.
I was a little kid when that stuff was going on with Ross Perot, and all I remember, I wasn't old enough to know anything about the political discourse of
He had
the time.
big ears, is all you knew?
All I knew is the big ears and all of the jokes people made about him and made fun of him, and I think they made fun of the way he talked, maybe, and that's about it. That's all I remember.
Yeah, I think he used to be like head of IBM or something and made a lot of money, and he's a billionaire, and he's a Texan. He was a little Texas guy. But, there are no little Texas people.
Right.
Everything
is big in Texas.
That does not exist. But anyway.
I mean, but obviously he was right about the jobs going to Mexico.
Yeah.
But not just Mexico.
And basically
everywhere.
what he did is he made it where kind of an unpopular at the time Arkansas governor became president because he got 18.9% of the popular vote in 1992. And it's what put Clinton in the White House over George H.W. Bush.
Right.
I believe if Perot had not been in that race, that it was pretty evident that Bush would continue on, another term.
Well, that kind of shows you the inherent, I think, a really huge weakness of our political system in America is that it's winner take all.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates this exact problem that you're talking about, where now you have to pool your resources behind the leading candidate. Otherwise, you get zero. You get nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a third-party candidate to come in, it's really foolish because if they're not one of the big two, Republican or Democrat, it's foolish to think that they have any chance of winning.
They don't. All they can do is ruin somebody else's
All they can
chance.
do is just ensure that whoever is most unlike themselves, so in Ross Perot's case, it'd be Bill Clinton, right? Mm-hmm. All he did was ensure that the guy who's most unlike him wins.
Yeah,
because he's going to be siphoning votes with people.
HW.
Yeah, he's going to siphon votes away from a guy who's more similar to him than the other guy. But he's not going to have any chance of actually winning.
Yeah.
So that's the problem I have with, number one, our system. I don't believe it should be winner take all. I think we could have a system. Now, obviously, winner has to take all with the president because there's only one president. But it's possible there are other systems out there where
I wouldn't want a parliament.
Well, like a parliamentary system where you have, seats can be delegated or can be assigned to parties, But here's another thing that I've heard people mention that would also work, even in the case of president. Ranked choice voting.
No. That cost us. No, that.
Well, think about this situation we're talking about here. If everybody who voted for Ross Perot said, "Okay, but if he doesn't win, I want George W. Bush
in Alaska with the senator."
Explain that to me, because I don't know.
Because what happens is that you get somebody that would not win the race outright; they win it in ranked choice voting.
Because people feel
it helps,
empowered to vote for somebody.
What it winds up doing is say there's a Republican establishment candidate, but there's a non-Republican establishment candidate who gets the nomination, and then they'll run this ranked choice voting, and it makes it where you get a Democrat.
I don't understand how that would work. Explain that to me.
It's somehow where you get...
Because if you're ranking your choices and both choices are Republican...
But it goes to the second time.
It goes to the
second time. We will have to do some research.
Let's do some research on it. We'll make it a future podcast,
if you look If you, I mean, you can look it up
because in
right
my mind
now.
it seems like a good idea.
Yeah,
like, okay, then I can vote for a third party and not think I'm giving my vote to the Democrat.
No, it is not a good. It is used by the establishment.
I see.
It's used by the establishment.
Well, I'm going to take your word for that since I haven't really done research on it.
I would have to do a little bit more on it myself to to be able to speak better about it. But no, you don't want ranked choice. No. No.
Interesting.
You have been.
Have I been deceived by
you've been snookered, man,
by the establishment?
You are low hanging fruit.
Well, okay, so because let's say that you have ranked choice and Ross Perot, you write Ross Perot, but then your second choice is George Bush. Now, by the way, don't think that I'm some big pro George Bush. He was the head of the CIA.
Yeah, I'm not.
I guess I'm a populist and I'm against the elites. So.
I'm not a Bush fan.
But anyway. I think Bush would have, well, who knows? Honestly, I don't know if Bush would have been better than Clinton at all. It probably would have been about the same. But either way...
Clinton actually wound up doing a lot of things good because in 94, when the Republicans took over the House and the Senate, he co-opted the Republican agenda.
There you go.
And he got reelected in 96. Clinton was a master politician. And he actually did pass some very good legislation. Mm-hmm. Because he co-opted Newt Gingrich's contract with America. Okay.
So whenever he saw a good idea, even if it was a Republican idea, he'd just take it.
If it would help him get reelected, he made a career out of that in Arkansas when he was governor. And he knew how to do his liberal stuff at the beginning of a term and then run to the right the last half of his term and get reelected. Huh. And he was a master politician.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I assumed that must be the case.
Some of the stuff that Clinton passed.
Because back in the 90s, you actually had to campaign to win an election, unlike today.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ross Perot, he had James Stockdale, Admiral Stockdale, as his vice president. Uh-huh. And Stockdale was a big-time war hero from the Vietnam War. I mean, it's like, I think maybe the highest-ranking prisoner of war. Yeah. I mean, he was, very high ranking. I don't know if he was an admiral when he was a prisoner of war or what, but and they did bad things to that man. But he made it out. He was famous for saying, if I'm trying to recall this out of my memory, is that when you were a prisoner of war, I don't know if he was at the Hanoi Hilton or where, but when you were a prisoner of war, he said the guys that would say, we're going to be out of here by Easter, we're going to be out of here by Christmas, those are the guys that wouldn't make it. But the guys that held out hope, and they didn't put a date on it, but somehow, some way, I will prevail, had that type of attitude, he said those are the guys that made it. Yeah. And so he was a very admirable guy, admirable admiral. And, man, when they had him and Dan Quayle and Al Gore in a debate, and he was the third person in the debate, and he was old, and I don't think he could hear well. And he kept getting overlooked during the debate. And all of a sudden he says something like, "Who am I and why am I here?" And you're like,
he pulled a Joe Biden.
Yeah, but I mean, he was a legitimate. That man had been, he'd been through the ringer. Yeah, but Ross Perot had him as his.
So he wasn't. He came across poorly on TV, huh?
If that was your only experience of Admiral Stockdale and you really didn't know his history, your immediate reaction would be, "Why is that old man up there?" Yeah, that old man. What is he all about? He's just some old guy who can't hear, and he doesn't act like he knows what's going on. Yeah. But he was a highly decorated, very valiant, brave man. Yes. But you don't know that. Yeah. So that was...
Well, TV makes politics harder, doesn't it? Yeah. Because you have to... You can't just be good.
Ever since the first... When Nixon ran against John F. Kennedy. Yeah. They showed... it was televised, and they showed Nixon sweating, and
Yeah, but, you can't... You're supposed to not... we're supposed to think, now because of TV, you have to come across well on TV. Yeah, again, Joe Biden seems to have broken that rule, doesn't he?
Well, you would think so.
Something odd happened
there. You would think so. So we had Ross Perot. He was considered a populist.
But now, while we're on the topic of third party, yes. I'm just curious what you think. Our current race that's going on now with Kennedy. Yes, he's a third party candidate. I don't even know.
He's a classic liberal.
I don't even know what the party is that you
He's a
would call
classic
it.
liberal who's anti-vax.
Yeah, I don't think he's even going with any party, is he? He's just an independent
He's
candidate.
independent right now.
There's no party behind him, is there?
The Democratic Party has so rigged their nominating process.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, you can be the only one that's gotten the votes during the primary, and yet be pushed aside, and somebody who got no votes
yes,
is all of
exactly.
a sudden the presumed candidate. It's
Not the presumed. By now,
Well,
as the time of this recording, she is the official.
Well, but
Democratic.
she's not been, voted on at their convention yet.
I thought that she had.
Not
It was a
yet.
virtual convention.
I don't think so.
It was It was done
Well,
virtually.
the people, the delegates,
She's the official nominee.
the
now.
delegates said that they would support her, but they have not had their convention yet. So maybe they do take that. I don't know.
We need to Google that later.
I
Fact
think we
check.
need to.
Somebody in the comments on YouTube fact check that. I'm waiting.
But she is
because what I heard is that there was already the delegation was already had virtually,
Really?
and she has been officially declared the
Okay.
Democratic nominee now.
all right. Well, I think until they actually have that convention, they can still change.
Okay. Well, in any case, it seems like that's like they're not going to pull another switcheroo.
You never know.
Although things don't look like they're going too well for that ticket
No.
for a number of reasons.
But Robert F. Kennedy
But Robert F. Kennedy
Jr.,
do you
whose
think?
dad was assassinated, and the Biden administration denied him Secret Service protection.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So we see history repeating itself, or at least trying to.
And with the type of protection Secret Service gives you, you may not want them anyway.
At this point. But here's my question: who do you think that Kennedy is potentially siphoning votes from? Do you think he's because he just went on the air a while ago and trashed Trump, and so is he siphoning votes from the Democrats or the Republicans or both?
I would say both.
Yeah.
I would say both. Because if you're a populist, your appeal is across the board. And there's some people that are populists that like...
But is Kennedy a populist?
No, well, he comes across some ways like that until you really look at his record.
Yeah.
And how he comes across as a populist, I would think, if I understand right, is that we have the government and all these agencies saying, you must be vaccinated, and he comes out against the vax.
Yeah.
And so it's the people against the government or the elite that says, you've got to do this, and, you have somebody saying, no.
Okay, so in your estimation then, would you say he's basically a non-factor in the election? If you think he's pulling from both sides,
In some states, he could be a factor.
yeah,
In some states, he could be a factor. I mean, when you're only winning a state by 5,000-6,000 votes.
yeah. So it's kind of going to be a toss-up to see what kind of an effect it has, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we'll really never know because it's not like we'll ever know who he siphoned the votes from. But interesting.
Yeah.
To me, I think he would be more so
Yeah.
siphoning votes from Democrats because he's such a liberal. I
He
mean,
is a liberal. But then you have some people that are libertarians who like his, government can't tell me what to do approach
yeah,
with vaccinations and all that. So you don't know until the voting is done, and then however they tabulate those votes.
yes,
But you have in the 2000s, early 2000s or early 2000s, you had the Tea Party, and
yep,
they came into being, and a lot of it, once again, you have the heavy hand of government, and then you also had from the liberal point of view, a couple of years after that, you had the Occupy Wall Street, which is a response to the banking crisis that we had in 2008, that time period. Then you had Bernie Sanders in 2016. He caught on. He was going up against the inequalities in our system, and he challenged Hillary Clinton. And some people thought that he probably had a good chance of getting the nomination, but once again, the Democratic Party has their nominating process in such a way that whoever they want, they're going to get.
yeah.
You're not going to have somebody that they don't want.
Yeah, that's very clear, and that doesn't bode well for them in general and how they would govern this country. If that's how they govern their party,
Well,
that's how they're going to govern the
I think
country.
how Hillary Clinton had it in the bag was through the superdelegates. And they have some process where you have these superdelegates, and they kind of make a big difference or whatever. Then, of course, also in 2016, you had Donald Trump, who his main message was "Make America Great Again."
Yeah.
And he had the us versus them mentality, obviously. Trump will say statements like, "They're not coming after me, they're coming after you, and I'm only standing in the way."
Yeah.
So that kind of goes with the people against the elite.
Yes.
And you have somebody that has a direct connection to the people. And they don't necessarily go through the party. That's why establishment Republicans are not in favor of Donald Trump.
Because he didn't go through their channels, did he?
Right.
He just came in from the outside.
I mean, you'll see like the former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, he's not going to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
I don't think any of the Bushes are going to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
And here he is. He's the Republican nominee
Yes.
for President of the United States. Even our former Attorney General, I think he's whatever he was he Attorney General Jeff Duncan?
Yeah.
Yeah,
we know, obviously, if you've been listening.
He's voting for Harris. He's a Republican.
Oh, that's insane to me.
It is insane.
But and you probably heard in the news about our Governor Kemp and his back and forth with Trump. He's probably not going to vote for Trump, I would assume.
Well, his wife isn't, I think. So here's what this one article says. This is, I think, from The Guardian, a British paper. It says, a populist movement then is one that consistently promises to channel the unified will of the people and by doing so undercut the self-serving schemes of the elite establishment. Okay, they quote Donald Trump when he says, quote, "We are transferring power from Washington, D.C. and giving it back to you, the people. The establishment protected itself, but not the citizens of our country." That's what Trump said. That's why he had such a broad appeal.
Yeah, I remember when he got elected the first time, I listened to the speech he gave for his inauguration.
Right.
And it was eye-opening. I mean, it was the way you heard him calling out basically the deep state and the establishment to their faces. I mean, many of them were sitting there.
Right there. Yep.
And the way you heard that happening, it was shocking.
It makes you understand why they would try to kill him.
Now, what I will say, for the next 4 years while he was president, I was rather underwhelmed with the actual results of that presidency. I mean, he talked a really big game, and especially that inauguration address was such a powerful smack in the face to the establishment. But, you know, I didn't see that the establishment really took too big of a hit over those 4 years.
I think they did in some ways. They were. It's all about. They talk about deconstructing the deep state.
Yeah.
And also they talk about redoing our monetary system, getting off, doing away with the Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
Which that's when you really get in
That's
bad
when
trouble.
you're really going to get in trouble, right?
Yes.
Now, do I remember correctly that was the type of thing that John F. Kennedy was potentially interested in at one point?
He mentioned, I think John F. Kennedy also mentioned having a beef with the CIA.
Yes.
Now, we're not going into conspiracy theories, but, things do happen.
If the shoe fits, right?
Here's something else that's said in this Guardian article. It says, quote, "If populism is truly ideologically thin, then it has to attach itself to a more substantial host ideology in order to survive." So you would think, like, for instance, Trump. He's not necessarily a conservative.
I don't think
But
prior to the recent history, not many people would have thought
He is more
of it.
friendly to the conservative cause than George W. Bush.
I believe that.
Because I remember when George W. Bush was president, when he was president, he would not defend conservatism. It was always like, why didn't he say something? Why is this happening like this? Why don't he speak out about stuff?
George Bush never came across to me as ideologically motivated by conservatism at all.
And I think part of also what happens is that when you're in that position as president and you're part of the system, you basically don't make a lot of decisions. They're all made for you already. And we'd say, well, Biden's just been a figurehead. Somebody else has been pulling the strings. Well, I think that's the situation with a lot of presidents. I think the thing with President Trump was that he didn't listen to him.
Yeah.
It's like with the trade agreements we have with these other nations. He came in and he said, look, these are bad agreements. we take it on the chin with every one of
I
these
think
guys.
Trump listened to him a bit more than he should have.
Yes, but I think he had some not the best people around him in some
I didn't
places.
like how one of the first things he did when he took office, he started bombing another foreign country. He bombed Syria. Happened really quick after he took office.
Yeah, but I think he had to do that to get rid of ISIS.
Yeah.
I think that they were allowed to run roughshod, and then it was over.
I guess.
It ended very quickly, and those people got put in their place, and they were no longer a menace.
Yeah.
That's my. But then he wanted to come out of. He wanted to stop the foreign wars, which is kind of a lot of people. All of a sudden, we wised up and said, "We did all this in Afghanistan and Iraq. We got nothing to show."
Yep.
And all these, servicemen and women, they've died, they were maimed, and the way we pulled out of Afghanistan after Biden became president, it's like if I had served in the military, if I was one of those guys who had gone over there, I'd be like really upset.
Oh yeah.
I mean, really upset the way that happened. Now, I know Trump wanted us to come out of Afghanistan, but he was still going to maintain a presence over there, maybe with the Air Force bases and stuff like that.
I can guarantee he wouldn't have done it the way
Biden
did
it. It wouldn't have been done that way. And so you have a populist like Trump, and he says, I want to take care of America. I want to make America great. Now, some would say, well, that's nationalism. You're against foreigners, such and such, whatnot.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. He's just saying it across the board. And when it comes to immigration, okay, we can't have millions and millions of people every year coming across our border.
Yeah.
No country can sustain that.
Yeah.
And, when you start having that happen, and somebody like Trump says, we need to build a wall, we need to get a hold on this immigration, then you're, accused of, being xenophobic or...
that's just ridiculous.
All kinds of stuff. And
nobody accuses the Japanese for, even though in many cases they are xenophobic, but nobody accuses them of that just because they protect their border.
Yeah,
and same for any other country.
That's part of being a country.
Yeah, it is. If you don't have a border, you're not a country.
So I think there's certain things of populism that are used in a pejorative sense. Oh, well, you're anti this, you're anti that, you're racist,
Yeah.
But then other parts of populism are legit in that it does represent, just the people.
So let me ask you this now, since we are Christians and our podcast is looking at things from a biblical point of view.
Right.
Where do you think all of this fits in with a biblical point of view to this? Like, do you think that obviously Marxism and socialism are not biblical at all.
Right.
What do you think about the Trump sort of populism in the same regard? Would you call it 100% Christian, 50% Christian? How would you view it? Because I view it as more of, how can I put it? I think it's the best voting option we have, but I still see some issues there from a Christian point of view that aren't ideal.
Yes. Trump is would not be an ideal representation of the Christian worldview.
Right.
I mean, let's just face it.
I mean, who yeah.
But his policies have been extremely friendly to Christianity and to the Jewish people. I mean, his grandkids are Jewish. His daughter's married to Jared Kushner, who's Jewish.
Yeah.
And, he's been, he moved the embassy in Israel to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
All of the previous presidents have said, we're going to move that. We're going to move it. We're going to move it. Never did it. He comes in office and said, oh, we're supposed to do that? Let's do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why a lot of people like him because, even with the Supreme Court justices, he did a pretty decent job with them.
Yeah.
I would like some of them to vote a little bit better than what they're doing, but compared to what Biden has put on the Supreme Court, he's done a good job. It prevented Hillary Clinton from having those appointments. If Hillary Clinton would have had those appointments to the Supreme Court from a Christian and moral point of view, it would have been devastating.
Yeah.
So Trump, I think he's very friendly toward Christianity.
Yeah.
Some people have compared him to a Cyrus who allowed the Jews to return and rebuild the temple. Some have compared him to Jehu, who became king of Israel, and in the process he...
Jehu?
Yes, exactly. In the process he kills Jezebel.
Okay.
Who, was the queen at the time,
Yeah.
Ahab's wife. And so many people see him as a reformer and as a guy who, although he's not necessarily Christian, although he does claim to be a Christian, I believe.
As does every politician,
But
pretty much.
But as he is somebody that goes toe to toe, and having been such a real estate developer in New York City,
Yeah.
he knows how the game is played.
For me, yeah, like you said, I know he claims to be a Christian. Let's just say I hope that's true. I'm not 100% sure if that is true. I'm not really terribly
Right.
convinced of
Right.
it. But let's just say that regardless of whether he is or isn't, he's certainly going to be far more friendly to Christians as a president than the alternative that we're faced with.
Yeah, the Democratic vice presidential candidate Walz,
Yeah.
he put tampons in boys' bathrooms because boys and girls both menstruate.
Right, of course. And so here's the thing
That's
about
ridiculous.
it. Yeah, it is. But what I think is we are at a moment in time where populism is going to be still in support of what is moral, because I still think you have a majority of people in America that are moral enough not to want to submit to socialism and tyranny.
Yeah, even Kamala Harris, she fought when she was Attorney General of the state of California. She fought for inmates to be able to have sex change surgery.
Yeah, and that type of stuff.
That's
Most
ridiculous.
people in America still are traditional enough to not want to see that going on,
Right.
and to not want to give up all their rights to an omnipotent government.
Right.
But what I would say is that time, regardless of whether Trump wins or
It's
loses,
a small window now, isn't it?
it's going to go away.
Yeah.
Because for decades and decades, we have allowed all of our institutions of learning to indoctrinate nearly everybody coming
Yes.
out of them with this garbage. That is, and so that is the real problem, that voting for Trump is never going to solve that problem.
Now, populism can be in the wrong direction, because Hugo Chavez down in Venezuela,
Yeah.
he's considered a populist. Of course, he's dead now. And, Venezuela went from a thriving economy to, one of the worst nations in the world. And now they're having an election where they're trying to get out of socialism, and they voted to get out of it, but Maduro does not recognize the election.
Yeah.
And so you have people who have there's a saying going around, which I think is great. You can vote your way into socialism, but you have to shoot your way out of it.
Yes. And that's a very good quote. I like that.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
But, I maybe this will blow some people's minds. Maybe this will blow your mind.
Small explosion.
But who do you think... I like that.
Thank you.
Who do you think is going to be the last great populist politician in all of history?
Had to be Chuck Norris.
Chuck Norris?
Yeah.
He's getting up there.
Yeah, he's in his 80s, but
My view of it is...
he's still selling products.
Yeah. And he's still writing a column, isn't he?
I don't know, but if you better read it if he writes it.
Yeah, that's true. Because he... what is it? Better look behind. When you're in Texas, you better look behind you, because that's where the Ranger's going to be.
The Ranger's going to be... He's going to give you that roundhouse.
Yeah. What I'm saying is, I think the last great populist politician in world history is going to be the Antichrist.
You're right.
What I'm saying is...
Well, you set that one up.
Yeah. Populism is going to be against us pretty soon.
Yeah.
Because the people are turning against the truth.
They are.
Right now, you have enough of the old generation still out there voting, still alive, to say, no, we don't want this madness in our country.
Right.
But if they lose this battle, unless we turn the tide of the indoctrination into the youth,
right,
they'll still wind up winning the war eventually.
One of the things that Trump has going for him, especially with the young voters, which is unusual because who was it? Winston Churchill said, "If you're not a liberal when you're young, you don't have a heart. If you're not a conservative when you're old, you don't have a brain."
I think that's a good quote too, because that's when I was younger and I was indoctrinated by some of the stuff that I was taught at UGA of all places.
Yeah, UGA has some liberal professors.
Yeah, and so I was a lot more liberal back then, and much less. I was much less.
When you get married, you have to pay your own bills, and you have to make your own way in life.
Yeah,
you tend to get a little bit more conservative, especially when you have to pay your taxes.
But really, more than I really wasn't terribly liberal even then. I was just more naive.
Yeah,
I got sucked into the false propaganda that Obama was putting out. And I believed
vote for him?
The first time, yes.
Paul, I just felt like a dagger.
Did you feel it?
A dagger went through my heart.
Does it make you feel better that I never did that again?
Now, I'm a pastor and everything, but I have never voted for a Democrat in my life.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Here's the deal. When I was coming up, all of Georgia was Democrat.
Yeah.
Okay. We did. I mean, Sonny Perdue was the first Republican governor since Reconstruction.
Jimmy Carter, right? Yeah.
And what happened is I was coming up, and I was, coming of age with Reagan.
Yeah.
And I was a young teenager, and I was like, oh man, Ronald Reagan and O.J. Simpson were my two heroes growing up. Okay. And Reagan, I started thinking, man, if Republicans are pro-life and Democrats are pro-abortion, why are all these Christians in Georgia voting for all these Democrats when the party platform is all about abortion?
Yeah.
I used to think that,
question.
And you would have some pretty decent Southern Democrats like Sam Nunn, who was a senator. He was very powerful with the Armed Service Committee and all that in the Senate, and kept a lot of the military bases in Georgia during the Bragg Commission. But I would just often think, why do you vote this way? And I was a young person. I was like, I don't see how all these people vote Democrat. I just could not understand it. And that's how the whole South was.
Yeah.
But what they would do is they would vote Democrat for the senators, for the representatives, for the governors, but they'd vote Republican for the president.
That makes no sense at all.
That's how it kind of got. And then eventually it kind of filtered down to where you started actually having Republican candidates in the South. Because I can remember when there weren't, the race for like governor or senator, it would be who won the Democratic primary, and that was going to be who's going to be the,
Yeah, that's how it is in my county here in Douglas County.
Yeah, so that's how it used to be all across Georgia.
Like there were all the billboards up for 10 pounds for sheriff. Yeah. I think you saw that one on I-20.
Yeah.
And I didn't even get to vote for sheriff.
Yeah.
Did you know that? Because I voted a Republican ticket.
But anyway, that's kind of free there.
Yes.
But what I say is when it comes to platforms, I vote according to platforms. The Republican platform best represents biblical beliefs, biblical values.
Yep.
The Democrat platform, you've got LGBTQ all in there. You've got abortion.
Yep.
All in there,
and also the Republican platform better represents the founding of our nation. We are a republic.
We are a republic,
and we are not a flat out democracy. Period, where it's mob rule.
But here's what happens: a lot of you blue collar workers who, because of their membership in unions and stuff like that, a lot of them in what they call the Rust Belt, they've always voted Democrat. But what a populist does, like
Trump,
and this was also Reagan did this because they'd call them Reagan Democrats.
Okay,
is that populist appeals to those blue collar because they don't completely agree with the Democrats, but they've always voted Democrat. And here's this guy coming in, and he kind of goes across party lines. And Trump really does go across party lines.
I think Trump is going to get a lot of vote from Democratic, and that's traditionally Democratic voters.
That's the populist appeal.
Yeah,
the populist appeal will go across party lines. And that's when you say, make America great again, you have people that are Republicans, people that are Democrats are like, I would like for America to be great again.
Because everybody can see it's as obvious as It's as obvious as the nose on your face. If you've lived for more than about 20 years or so, then you know that America is not what it used to be.
Right.
It's going downhill.
Right.
It's obvious.
And like, I don't agree with everything the Republicans do. I don't like every Republican, but the Republican platform, in my opinion, best represents biblical values. It's the closest to biblical values, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
It's not even close. You can have populists like a Bernie Sanders or Hugo Chavez, or you can have a Ross Perot or a Donald Trump.
Yeah.
It's going to be, if it's from the right side, they're going to be against the establishment, the political establishment. It's going to go towards nationalism. If you got it from the left side, they're going to be against the big money people, and it's going to go towards socialism.
Yeah, and I really do think that somebody like Donald Trump is absolutely the best shot we Christians have got for a good leader going forward, because we've already reached a point in time where if a guy can be labeled as a quote-unquote fundamentalist, that's political death right there in this country already.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Pence. That's what they labeled Pence, as a fundamentalist. He has no shot.
I don't like Pence because
I don't like Pence either. I don't like the guy. But, I'm just pointing out that one of the big marks against him politically is that he's called a fundamentalist.
Mm-hmm.
So the point I'm making is, as a Christian, you can complain that Donald Trump isn't a fundamentalist, and you can complain about that and say, he's done a lot of stuff that's not moral. He's probably not a true Christian. He doesn't take it all that seriously, whatever. But then at the end of the day, you got to realize if that weren't the case, he'd be getting slapped with the label fundamentalist, and he wouldn't even have a remote shot of beating the Democrats.
His policies are a lot more favorable to Christians than Kamala.
So sadly,
Harris.
We do live in a situation where you do have to choose the lesser of two evils.
You do.
And if you
only have two choices.
Well, that's the other thing that very much I get annoyed by, when people go around talking about, well, no, you need to vote your conscience and just write it in if you don't like any of the candidates. Yeah, I mean, it is not an intelligent thing to do, because you are throwing away your vote. Because we do live, this isn't just an opinion poll where there's no wrong answer. It's not like that. It's a contest. And there are very real consequences for who wins.
Who can you live with the better?
Yeah. So if you vote for somebody who you like but has no chance of winning, then it is just like you didn't vote, because the only way that the vote...
Why bother?
Why bother? The only way... And, a lot of people feel like their vote doesn't count, and so they get demoralized and they don't want to vote, period. And I understand that, especially with what happened in 2020 and the clear just nonsense that was going on, and nothing got done about it. So I understand that, but I still vote just because, I can't guarantee that somebody's not going to hack and cheat, and I can't guarantee that won't happen, but it doesn't cost me anything.
I thought you did it for a sticker.
The sticker's free. You get a sticker. That's a good one.
Yeah.
So, but I'll just go do it just on the off chance that it will get counted and it will make a difference. I mean, everybody gets that vote, so I don't get why. Just go do it, and if they cheat, well, that's on them. They did it.
Yeah, I think one of the things you have to remember, back when George W. Bush beat Al Gore in 2000, and even probably in the 2004 when he beat John Kerry, who served in Vietnam, they had the Diebold machines, and they said Diebold was a supporter of George W. Bush, and so they try to make a deal out of those machines. From the left, try to make a deal out of those machines. Yeah, and just like some like on the right says, hey, these Dominion machines, we don't know if we can trust them, whatnot. So anyway, so you have a populist Republican, running against a hardcore liberal Democrat. As a matter of fact, in 2019, Kamala Harris was voted the most liberal senator.
I think the only thing she has going for her is the powerful institutions let's call them elites, that want to see her there.
Behind her.
She has a system behind her, and she has most of Hollywood behind her. And there's a lot of sway there.
Yeah.
We gotta hope for election integrity. Mm-hmm. We have to hope that the things that seemed to go on last time won't be allowed to happen this time.
Yeah, when 5 states quit counting at the same time, there's something to that.
Another thing people are talking about is peaceful transfer of power. And, of course, Joe Biden was asked that question, and he said he's not at all confident that there will be a peaceful transfer of power if Trump wins. That's what he said. But then he said, excuse me, if he loses. So, but at first he said wins. And then he tried to correct himself and say, no, if he loses, then I'm not confident. Well, first of all, who's already in power?
He is.
He is. Mm-hmm. So how could there, if Trump loses...
Just do it. Just have a peaceful transfer of power.
So hold on, Joe Biden. If Trump loses, there is no transfer of power because...
He has none.
The power is going to stay with the Democrat Party.
Yeah.
So that's not a transfer of power.
No.
But what he did say was, before he quote-unquote corrected himself, he said he's not confident there will be a peaceful transfer if Trump wins. Mm-hmm. That's the words that came out of his mouth first. And that actually is a potential threat. Mm-hmm. Because honestly, the way it looks in this country, it looks like, I'll call it the elites. They are not going to, like, what has happened, I mean, like you've said a million times, this is conspiracy theory. I don't care if people call that. I don't care if that charge is thrown out there. But it looks to me like every stop is being pulled out to try to prevent Trump from taking office. Mm-hmm. It's been legal challenge after legal challenge after legal challenge. And then when that didn't work, there was an actual attempt on his life, which was allegedly a lone gunman.
On a sloped roof.
Because of that sloped roof. Yeah. That was just too dangerous for those guys. Oh, and the more you listen about it, the more it gets crazier. Like, people were warning them days in advance, it sounds like. And there's even a video that came out now that showed him scurrying around on that roof like minutes before he took the shot. Yeah. And so, honestly, it just looks to me like there's a vested power here that does not want to see him take office, does not want to give it up. And if they're willing to do all of this, if they're willing to shoot him, what are they going to be willing to do if he does win? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't.
It seems like a very dangerous time we're living in.
It's a very dangerous time. We got next several months, 4 or 5 months, are going to be crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
so buckle up.
Well, Paul, appreciate you talking about this populist stuff.
Yes.
And I want to encourage all our listeners to be praying for our nation, be praying for this upcoming election. All elections are big, but I think this is a really, really big election, and we just need God's guidance.
We do, yeah.
And God's blessing. All right, we hope y'all have a great day, and we will see you next time on the Uncensored Pilgrims. And we need to let you know that the views that we express on this podcast belong to Marty McLain and Paul Price. They are our views. They do not reflect the views of anyone else. And with that said, we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you next time on the podcast.